Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy was only man and crew? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Bluewr for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. The sky was clear of clouds, it was a beautiful and sunny day, perfect for the start of the journey of the Pirate King. In a boat, in the middle of the open ocean, a tall and muscular dark-haired boy with a scar under his left eye was lazily lying on the boat. He wore a red t-shirt, short jeans, a pair of flippers, and had an impressively old straw hat on his head. Bored, Lou. Besides him, there was a blonde girl lying on him, with her index finger playfully wandering on his muscles. She had long blonde hair, used a long black jacket with a buckle on the left sleeve, with a blue shirt and vest, a frilled cravat, and a simple belt holding a pair of loose light blue pants with black boots. Her were of a strong red, clearly because of a tick. Shishishi, with you here how would I be bored, Sabri? As Luffy said that he played with her hair, making the blonde smile even more. You know what to say to a girl, don't you? Sabrine says as she leaves some light kisses on his, marking it with her tick. Of course I do. Both laughed as Sabrine made herself more comfortable, lying on top of Luffy and putting her face next to his. Say it, when do you think we are going to land? No, it doesn't really matter, we are in no hurry. He said as he caressed her hair and kissed her forehead, just because he felt like it. To which she answered, kissing him on the, and that's what they did for several minutes. Separating her from Luffy, she smiled and asked. When do you think we are going to have some action? Shishishi, we can have it now. Sabrine rolled her eyes and explained. That's not what I meant, silly. She picked Luffy's cheek and played with it as she said that, which only made the dark-haired smile more. I know. But you are right, it would be nice to fight a little soon. Luffy says, stretching his arms and getting up, hugging Sabrine and looking at the horizon. Yeah, it would. Well, that was fun. Always a blast to see you using your powers, Lou. They were also so useful to make us arrive here, it's much easier to travel when you know where you want to go, ha. Some few hours later, Luffy and Sabrine, with a new guest, a pink-haired boy called Kobe, arrive at the island in the Itsuba region of the East Blue, the one with Shell's town on it. It's all thanks to Kobe. Are you sure you want to join the Marines? You would be a nice navigator for my crew, Kobe. Luffy said as he patted Kobe on his back, as if he was trying to raise the boy's spirit. Thanks, Luffy-san, I feel honored, especially coming from someone as strong as you, but my dream still is to be a Marine, and one day, even arrest you. And as if Luffy's jest had worked, the small boy even managed to declare his ambition, something that would be a bold dream for him a few hours before the whole event where he met Luffy and Sabrine. Hearing Kobe's declaration, the couple of pirates smiled at the boy, but their expressions were obviously challenging him to try and go after them. We should get going. We need to figure out where the Roronoa is, and Kobe needs to enlist in the Marines. Sabrine said as she hugged Luffy's arm. However, before they could even give one step further into the town, Luffy's stomach rumbled as if a thunder was falling from the sky. Some fishermen, workers and civilians that were around got scared by the sudden noise and looked around looking for dark clouds that would be the sign for a storm. However, they saw nothing, only getting more confused. Trying to hold her laughter, Sabrine put her face on Luffy's shoulder. Kobe also gave a small laugh, accompanied by Luffy himself. Before we do anything, I need to have lunch. Yeah, we can't go recruit a new crewmate with empty stomachs. So the three nonchalantly walked down the streets, casually looking for some place to eat. Kobe didn't have much money with him, even after they defeated Alvidas, the one that enslaved him. The boy barely got any money for himself, letting Luffy and Sabrine keep most of it. Of course, the two of them didn't mind paying for his food. It didn't take them long before finding a nice-looking family restaurant. 20 minutes later and Kobe and Sabrine were already full, with Luffy still devouring all the piles of food they could possibly pay for, which meant a lot. Their table was already full of plates, the Straw Hat user was eating faster than the restaurant could take the plates out. So, what exactly is your plan, Kobe? Do you know anything about the base here? Seeing that Luffy was still busy with the food, the blonde decided to ask the pink-haired about his future plans. I am a little worried because of my background, but there is nothing I can do about it, except hope for the best. Kobe said, both to reassure himself and to try to act confident. Seeing that both Luffy and Sabrine smiled at him, approving his words, he continued. About the base, well, I don't know much, but I think it is kinda famous. The captain got the infamous Kuro of 1,000 plans, his name was Morgan, I think. Hearing him talking, both the blonde and the dark-haired nodded, with Luffy's cheeks still being full of food. However, everyone else that was in the restaurant jumped afraid, putting as much distance as they could from the trio. Each one of the three had a different reaction to that. Sabrine raised her eyebrows, starting to formulate some ideas in her head to what could be the situation on the island. Luffy simply laughed as he finished eating the last dishes. Even so, like his girlfriend, he also had an idea of what was going on. And counterpart Kobe looked around confused, not seeming to understand the implications or reasoning for the people to act like that. After that they didn't stay for much longer, since Luffy had finally finished his pile of plates. The owner didn't seem to mind when she saw the payment though. Shishishi, that was a funny place. Luffy said with his arm around Sabrine's waist as they went down the street to go to the marine base. I don't understand. Do you two have any idea what made people react that way? Kobe however still hasn't moved on from the weird scene in the restaurant. His mind simply couldn't get around what was the reason for those people's actions. You know Kobe, maybe you shouldn't blindly trust the Marines. Sabrine said looking ahead, without taking a glance at the pink-haired boy. What do you mean, Sabrine-san? He stopped in the middle of the street and looked confused at the blonde that even so still didn't look at him. Let's go to the marine base, Kobe. Maybe you will understand there. Luffy was the one that answered, making a motion with his hand for Kobe to follow them. Confused and with a sense of dread in his eyes, Kobe knew whatever happens from now on, whatever the two of them seemed to already knew that he couldn't go back. Good thing that he didn't want to. Gulping, he went on to walk side to side with Luffy. It barely took more than a minute to get to the marine base. It was the biggest building of the city, and while normally this would be a good sign, Luffy and Sabrine felt a sensation of oppression coming out of that base. Even Kobe gulped nervously in front of that place. Well, haha, here we are. So what's your guys' plan? Trying to fake normality, the wanted Marine asked the pair. That's with the captain. So, what will Luffy do? Sabrine asks, smiling as she poked Luffy's right cheek with her index finger. Let's see. He starts moving towards the wall and simply stretching his feet he manages to look above it. Hearing him whistle, Sabrine and Kobe also moved to the wall, but since both were not so high as Luffy, they had to use their arms to support their bodies and look above the wall. Luffy had a curious look, Sabrine had a neutral expression, and Kobe was shocked. What she is doing in the middle of the square. What crossed their eyes was a big and empty square, with mostly dirt on the ground and grids around the whole place. It was almost empty, except for one person. Tied by some ropes to a wooden cross, using a dirty white shirt, a green haramaki in her thin waist, dark pants and boots of the same color. She was looking down, shadows covered her face, so none of the three could describe her expression. The woman had short green hair that also looked dirty and was covering her forehead and eyes. Hey, you guys, wanna come here and untie me? I'm tired of this place already. If you do it, I will have some money for you. Kobe holds the impulse to beg for them to not free her. After all, in his mind, if they let her free, no one would know what kind of bloodbath could happen. However, he remembered the Straw Hat Boy's powers and closed his mouth before even one word was out. Let you go? Well, I don't know what Luffy started saying in an ironic way. He was interested and curious in this said mortal bounty hunter, but before he could continue, a ladder showed up out of nowhere on their side, with a little girl being the one to climb it. She looked at her right and left, then looked at the trio and put her index finger in front of her mouth, asking them to be quiet. As Kobe got more confused with this development, Luffy and Sabrine quietly watched as the girl approached the supposedly deadly criminal. What followed was a conversation with a little girl offering Zoro some rice balls, to which the huntress replied, telling her that she shouldn't be there and to go away as fast as she could. The green-haired woman didn't even take a glance at the rice balls, which, added to her harsh words, didn't exactly make the little girl feel too good. While Kobe complained about how she could be so inhuman, the pair of pirates noted a slight glint of worry on her eyes, as well as that she made a lot of effort to simply not look at the rice balls. They understood less and less why such a woman was in this situation. What are you doing here, kid? Suddenly a voice resounded in the square. Zoro gritted her teeth, and the little girl paled at that, even letting her carefully made rice balls fall on the ground. 3 people entered the square, 2 obvious Marines, one being bigger and looking more muscular, with blonde hair, steel jaw and an axe for one of his arms. His clothing also showed his position as a captain, the Captain Morgan, the pink-haired boy mentioned earlier, while the other just looked like a plain Marine. The third person was a convincing-looking brat with also blonde hair and, at least, a weird choice of clothing. Kobe commented in his relief that Marines showed up, but Luffy and Sabrine, seeing how the little girl reacted with pure fear, were certain nothing good would come from these Marines. Girl, don't you know how to read? Morgan said, pointing to a board with sayings that no one was allowed to come in the square or get near the prisoner. The girl got even more pale and gave some steps back, getting closer to Zoro, who looked at the 3 with rage. What scary eyes, Rorana? Do you want to challenge us? Are you looking to die? The blonde boy said, pointing to the huntress, challenging her to reply, to which she replied only with a click of her tongue. Aye. The rules are clear, and if you don't obey my rules you deserve death. It was as if the whole island went silent, not even a single leaf seemed to fall from a tree. Kobe's eyes were so that it wouldn't be a surprise if they fell out of his head, his whole world vision just crashed in seconds in front of him, it would take a burden in his mind. Even if he didn't know the girl, Luffy got enraged to the point where he accidentally broke the part of the wall he was holding. Sabrine wasn't much better, though she didn't break the wall, purely because she had better control of her strength and emotions. But both were leaking killing intent. Firstly, hearing that, Zoro's eyes went wide, just like Kobe, but in the next second she was already just as enraged as the duo of pirates and tried to force her way out of that state to save the girl. The little kid herself fell on her knees crying and screaming. Even the blonde boy and the second marine were shocked with the captain's action. Wait, Dad, she is just a little K. The boy started to try to negotiate, only to be punched by Morgan himself and be sent to the other side of the square. Shut up. Those who disobey me, who disobey justice must be punished. But Dad, the boy tried to argue, still on the floor with tears getting out of his eyes as he looked at his father with fear. Shut up. I already let you fool that bitch with that stupid deal of yours. I am already tired, she is dying today too. Morgan declared those words, no longer looking at his son, but at the little girl and the slightly shocked but much more enraged Zoro behind her. The boy didn't dare to go against the captain anymore and simply tried to go further away from him. I thought we had an agreement, she said between gritted teeth, looking at Morgan, wishing she could just separate his head from his neck. That was me letting my useless son try to get some fame as the one that imprisoned and later killed the pirate huntress. But if he can't even do as much as reinforce justice, he doesn't deserve to do so. The other marine stayed still, pale and sweating like he never did in his life. Morgan approached the girl, looked down at her and raised his axe-like arm. The second marine gulped and pointed his arm to his superior, ready to pull the trigger, knowing he would probably be killed. So you're justice? What do you think about it, Lou? That simple question seemed to break all the tension as Luffy and Sabrine joined, suddenly showing up at Morgan's side. Everyone looked at them with a mist of shock and curiosity, except for Morgan, that looked at them with even more rage. Or why? Interrupting the marine, who was only a little taller than him, Luffy put his hand on Morgan's shoulder and pushed him down on his knees. Morgan had no chance or ability to resist, and from one second to the other, he was put on his knees because of a random boy that he never saw before. Stay still. When the dark-haired boy said that, sparks of lightning went out of his body to Morgan, surrounding the captain and paralyzing him. Didn't matter how much he tried to move, his muscles simply couldn't obey his mind. Not giving a second glance to the marine, he moved to the little girl with Sabrine on his side. Luffy got on his knees and Sabrine inclined, both wanting to get their faces near the little girl. Shishishi, don't worry, the bad guy won't hurt you now. His words as he patted her head brought a sense of relief the little girl didn't think she could feel in this situation. Want to come with me? I know someone that will bring you to your house. Sabrine said as she extended her right hand. The little girl hesitated for some seconds, looked at Luffy, and then grabbed Sabrine's hand. The two went out of the square, where Sabrine gave the girl to Kobe to take her home. Still in shock and saddened, he did what was needed, and Sabrine went back to Luffy's side. While this happened, the Straw Hat user went face to face with the pirate huntress. How did you do that? The green-haired woman had to ask, seeing the weird development things took. She could see the lightning arcs that sometimes showed up around Morgan's body, but she had no idea how that was possible. Unless those things she heard drunken old people talk about in some bars were true. Shishishi, it doesn't really matter for you now, does it? Luffy asks confidently, smiling at her. DSC, yeah, you are right. Who are you and what do you want? I am Monkey D. Luffy, future Pirate King. And I want you to join my crew. I am Sabrine. The blonde simply said, hugging Luffy's right arm. However, her declaration was completely ignored because of what Luffy said. The Pirate King. And you want me to join your crew? I don't want to be a criminal. In response to her relatively rough answer, Luffy and Sabrine looked from one side to another, noticing some more marines joining around, but all of them trembling as they saw Morgan on his knees. None of them dared to approach. The captain himself had his face full of veins, almost bursting from rage, but Luffy deprived him of even screaming. Are you sure you have much of a choice at this point? Sabrine couldn't help but ask, having to hold her laughter, to which Zoro could only grit her teeth knowing the blonde wasn't incorrect. Stopping her laughter, Sabrine looked at the green-haired woman with a small smile on her dot. Let's do it like this. We heard you are a swordswoman, right? Where are your swords? The blonde asked, looking around like she was looking for the swords. Those assholes took them. The idiot there must know where they are. Zoro said angrily, looking at the scared boy in the corner, who seemed to have pissed himself. Sabrine's smile got a little wider, and Luffy rubbed his chin. I see. He turned his head to the blonde boy on the floor that looked at him as if he was the most terrifying monster he has ever seen. Luffy extends his left arm in his direction, and the arm turns into a bolt of lightning that goes until the boy, creating a field of electromagnetism that allowed him to grab him like he was using his normal arm. Pulling the scared blonde closer and noticing that if he was older he would probably already died of a heart attack. "Hey, where are my crewmate's swords?" he demanded, putting his right hand around the boy's neck and ignored Zora's complaining about not being his crewmate. "I in my room." Looking like he used all his strength to just say those words, he also pointed out a window in the base that they all could see from there. In the next second there was a strong light that blinded all those in the square, except for Sabrine that closed her eyes knowing what would happen. When they managed to open their eyes again, Luffy was standing there with 3 swords in his arms and the boy on the floor. "Are you?" With the most shocked expressions Zoro ever showed in her life, she looked at Luffy. He was something that came from another world. "I ate Goro no me. I am a lightning hunter." Explaining with a big smile, his right hand turned into several bolts of lightning, making Zoro even more shocked. So it wasn't just drunk talk, these things do exist. You would be surprised with the amount of things that actually exist. Either way, now that we have your swords, what do you plan on doing? Sabrine's question took the swordswoman out of her surprise. "You two don't. Shishishi. Your idea of not being a criminal seems kinda useless now, right? Doesn't matter what happens, you will probably be wanted from now on. Also, I have your swords, if you want them back you have to join my crew." The big smile on his face didn't make it seem like he was blackmailing someone. Zoro looked at him. For some seconds she looked lost in his smile, until she also gave her own daring smile. "You must be the son of the devil." She didn't notice the slight change of expression on Sabrine's face when she said that. "Okay, give me my swords, I will join your crew." The straw and top hats users looked at each other with triumphant expressions. "So these 3 swords are yours? Cool." As he said that, Luffy put the swords in each one of Zora's hands, and seeing her open her mouth, he put the sword of white hilt on her mouth. In one move she took the scabbards out of her swords and cut the ropes that were keeping her on that stake. Then she looked at Luffy and put the tip of the sword on his neck, a small and harmless bolt of lightning being created because of this. Sabrine put her hand on the steel pipe on her back, but Luffy made a motion for her to stop. "I will join your crew. However, I will be the best swordswoman in the world, and if you get in my way, I will kill you." She wasn't sure about what their reaction would be, but Luffy and Sabrine's eyes shining for sure wasn't what she was expecting. "That's great. If my first new crewmate wasn't something at least of this level, as the Pirate King I would be embarrassed." Luffy proudly said, looking content at Zoro with crossed arms. "You truly seem to be perfect for this crew." Sabrine said, much happier than she obviously was a moment ago. Zoro couldn't help but contemplate, not noticing the small smile she herself ended up having. It was hard to blame her though, since she was basically the perfect person that she could ever fit with. "I see, that's great then. So Captain, what are your first orders?" It was obviously what she meant as she said that, looking at Morgan. During all this time he was still locked, not managing to move a single muscle. He looked so furious that it was remarkable that not a single vein on his forehead didn't explode. "Do you want to deal with him?" the captain asked, looking at his first mate. "Would be a pleasure, Captain." The green-haired swordswoman said with what could only be called a demoniac expression. With a snap of his fingers the lightning around Morgan finally disappeared. "Viewing scum. I Wisconsin." Zora appeared behind him, putting her swords on their respective scabbards as a clean cut started forming on Morgan's head as it fell on the floor, followed by a burst of his blood spilling everywhere out of his decapitated neck. It splashed on Morgan's body, that fell on the ground itself, Zora's back and Luffy and Sabrine. The boy had long ago fallen unconscious, and no one else paid attention to him, and as the 3 bloodied pirates looked at the other marines, none of them wanted to fight. Actually, it seemed like the opposite. "We are finally free. Morgan is dead." And other screams with that logic happened all around the square. Luffy, Zoro and Sabrine looked at each other with half understanding, half curious expressions. "That's not even them like the captain," Sabrine said, yawning, since she had nothing to do, all a little boring for her. Then Luffy and Zora's stomach made a sound that could be confused with an earthquake and scared all the marines. "I am hungry," both said at the same time, with amazing synchrony. After they basically gave the same restaurant they went before, enough money for them to probably never have to work for the rest of their lives, saw as Kobe joined the marines and were calculated by those same marines as they went away, the trio at least had an interesting story to tell. "So, what exactly is the relation between the two of you?" Now on the boat in the middle of the ocean and with Shell's town being a distant line on the horizon, Zora asked as she inclined her body on one part of the boat. Luffy and Sabrine were on the other side of the boat, hugging each other. "I am his girlfriend and vice captain." she proudly said, leaning on Luffy's body, patting her head in response. I see. I suppose he is the muscles and you the brain. Shishishi, not exactly but kinda. Luffy didn't elaborate further, making Zoro raise an eyebrow, but she didn't pursue the matter further. You seem to have a lot of questions. Sabrine said, noticing that Zoro still seemed curious with other things. Yeah, some. But first, what's the next captain? To be on a boat in the middle of the ocean, with the sun as high on the sky as it could possibly be, and being on the said boat with two people she just met hours ago, would be, at least, a not so pleasant experience for Zoro. Surprisingly so, it was. Three-sword style. That's so cool. You learned it on your own or someone teached you? Damn, to be so great at it you must have had one hell of a teacher. Luffy's excited voice resounding on the boat kept things from getting monotonous. His eyes were shining as he looked at Zoro, talking about her skills. On his side, Sabrine also was looking at her with curiosity and wonder in her eyes, almost like a kid looking at something amazing. Zoro just imagined she was glad to find a new crewmate that seemed to do well. Of course, it's cool. I had a master, but he only teach the usual ways. I had to develop Santoryu by myself. Also, he wasn't exactly supportive of me with a sword. She said that with a small smile of depreciation on the corner of her mouth. What an asshole. Humph, if he thought you were not capable then he wasn't a good teacher. The Green was caught off guard by the strong reactions of the captain and the vice captain. The look of content of their faces had turned into a frown. It was a little weird for her, she didn't understand why they reacted in such a way to her words, but it did made her feel good. Doesn't matter now, I am on my own either way. Actually, I guess I am with you too now. Hearing Zora's words, Luffy and Sabrine's expressions changed again. Both showed wide and welcoming smiles that the swordswoman didn't mind dumbly staring at for some long moments. She didn't even notice a slight, and not even visible, blush on her cheeks. Yeah, you bet you are. Noticing that Zoro was slowly relaxing and letting herself in, Sabrine happily said. And this means that you self-learned your own style. Shishishi, no doubt you will be the best swordswoman then. Luffy said, leaning on the boat and resting his head on Sabrine's lap. Breen's eyes went slightly wide after hearing the captain's words, and soon enough a confident expression took Zora's face. Of course, after all you got the best of the best. She proudly, or arrogantly, said. She crossed her arms and gave them a satisfied look, with a strong smile and determined eyes. A small moment of silence fell upon them. Sabrine started playing with Luffy's hair, and Zoro laid down, grabbing a bottle of sake they got from Shell's town. The people didn't hide how helpful they were with Morgan's demise. They basically had enough food and drinks for days. At least, that's what Zoro thought for now. Zora, would you mind showing me your swords? I noticed that one of them seems to be of high quality. Breaking the silence, Sabrine asked, remembering the scene of Zora's fastly cutting Morgan's head from his neck. It was just a moment, but she had the opportunity to take a look at their newest crewmate's swords at that moment. Sure. Though, I only have one great sword. The other two are some random ones an old man gave me once, and I just kept them. They don't even have names. Zora explained as she took her swords out of their scabbards and passed them to Sabrine for her and Luffy to look at. It wasn't hard for the blondie to distinguish each one was the high-quality sword from the not even named ones. It had a pure white hilt with a circular handguard, the stealth was also white, and the blade was straight. Sabrine could feel by touch how carefully made that sword was. Even Luffy that didn't understand much about weapons could see the quality of that katana. Zora looked at them with appreciation that they could see the value of something she held with just as much regard as her own life. How did you get it? And what is its name? Sabrine couldn't avoid her curiosity and asked as she handed the swords back to Zora. She only took a fast glance at the other two, they were not bad, but pale in comparison to the white-hilted one. Seeing the amazement and curiosity in the pair's eyes, Zora had a gentle expression. It's the Wado Ichimonji, maybe you heard about it. She explained as she looked at her own katana. Both Luffy and Sabrine noticed a look of nostalgia on Zora's face. Is this sorta what was that thing you told me about one Sabri? He asked, looking up to ask his girlfriend. The blondie simply answered, impressed that Zora had her hands in such a precious sword. Yeah. It was something someone important left to me. She didn't elaborate further, and neither the captain nor the vice captain felt the need to ask her about it. Shishishi, whoever it is must be proud of you. Luffy said, getting up and facing Zora with a bright smile. Sabrine did the same, obviously agreeing with Luffy. And Zora could only look at Luffy in wonder and at a loss of words. He was someone with a dream as crazy as hers that had randomly recruited her. But as if fate had arranged things, and maybe it did, she just seemed to perfectly fit with him. They barely knew each other for hours, however Zora felt like they already had a lot of confidence in her, and in her part, she also had some confidence in them. It was weird, but that didn't mean she didn't like it. Enough about me. What about explaining about that weird ability that you have? A devil fruit you said, right? I thought those things were stories to make kids piss on their beds. Luffy and Sabrine's head fell back as they loudly started to laugh, even some small tears formed in the corner of their eyes. Damn, I kinda forgot that those things are rare here. Luffy said, scratching his head. Yeah, we got too used to you having it for a long time. Sabrine cleaned a small tear that formed in her eyes as she said that. Well, Zoro started, getting out some drinks and food. You can tell me about it during dinner. With this whole lot of food I bet we can eat as much as we want. The brightness started shining on Luffy's eyes, and a small drop of sweat ran from Sabrine's forehead. She wanted to stop Zoro's mistake, though it was already too late. Let's eat. Luffy said, almost jumping on the boat. Sabrine was about to say something when a small rumble came from her stomach. She was a little doubtful for some moments, but at the end simply decided to join Luffy. I am hungry. Supporting their heads on the side of the boat, with their bodies lazily lying on the deck of the boat. Luffy and Sabrine complained for what it was probably the 10th time at bare minimum. Luffy had the face of a sad puppy, and Sabrine seemed to have lost part of her soul, as her eyes aimlessly faced the waves of the ocean. Shut up. God damn it. We wouldn't have this problem if you two weren't such gluttons. On the other side of that boat Zoro screamed with shark-like teeth and a vein popping up on her forehead. Even her eyes seemed to be in flames. 3 days had passed since they left Shell's town. At first the swordswoman was sure they would have food for some days, after all the people from the town were pretty generous with them. The food was basically gone 2 days ago. Not only Luffy, but Sabrine too, looked like they simply were bottomless pits that could beat infinite amounts of food without changing their figures. With the captain they could try to justify it, since he had powers that changed his whole body, but Sabrine had nothing and was still as well as Luffy. In the end she just decided to give up trying to make sense of this couple. Sabri, how long till we get to an island? Luffy asked as he slowly slipped to the deck. Since he was too big to lie down cutting through the boat, his head was on one side of it and his feet were outside of the boat. I don't think it will take much longer, probably some hours. Can you see something, Zoro? Mentally thanking the heavens that they shut up about their hunger, they took one monocle and looked ahead. And indeed, there was something. Well, they still couldn't see it from where they were, using the monocle they could tell there was the outline of an island forming on the horizon. Yes, there is an island there, but it's obviously hours from here. Zoro said, turning back to face Luffy and Sabrine, and lied on the boat crossing her arms. As boring as it sounded, she was more than ready to wait for a few more hours. However, her words made Luffy's eyes shine with anticipation and something else. While Zoro just thought he was happy to finally hear about an island, the vice captain knew what her boyfriend was planning. Luffy wait, but it was already useless. Grinning, the captain jumped from the boat, holding the back of it. His body never touched the water though, as his bottom turned into lightning, and he made the boat turn into a simulation of a rocket as it went straight to the island. The force of the wind pushed both Zoro and Sabrine to the back of the boat. The two felt like they were breaking through wall after wall of solid air. It ended as fast as it began, and the two, now free of the pressure that had fallen upon their bodies, fell with their faces turned to the deck. Luffy dematerialized and rematerialized in front of the boat, his grin didn't get any smaller. Shishishi, much faster right? He asked, getting on his knees and looking inside the boat. Sabrine sighed and then laughed. Luffy, next time warn us beforehand. There are easier ways to try to kill your crewmates. You know that, right? Zoro said, getting up and rubbing the side of her forehead and a frown on her eyes. Sorry. But I wouldn't be so rough if I didn't know you two couldn't handle it. In response to his apology, Sabrine laughed as hard as she could, and Zoro gritted her teeth with a strong blush showing on her cheeks. Be careful with your words, Captain. They said as she got out of the boat, rolling her eyes. Luffy opened his mouth, noticing his small mistake. Dufu, maybe you should consider your words better, Lu. The blondie said, wanting to make fun of him. She held his right shoulder and got on the top of her feet to give him a kiss on the cheeks. Haha, yeah, I will. He simply answered, patting his girlfriend on the head. Zoro watched their small interaction with a sense of peace. She had gotten used to them in the last 3 days, and she felt nice just watching the two. Her eyes crossed with Sabrine, that sent her a warm smile, and then they looked at their surroundings. They were on a port, however unlike in Shell's town, there were no fishermen, no sellers, not even civilians walking down the roads or around the port. Actually, there were only 2 ships in the whole port, their small boat and another one much bigger. It resembled an actual ship as much as resembled an actual circus. A lot of it looked like a tendon, and the figurehead was an elephant with a cannonball for a trunk. The ship was all colorful, with a lot of different colors through it, the ones prominent being red and purple. And in the main flag there was a painting with a skull with a clown-like appearance. Anything about it, Sabri? Luffy asked his girlfriend and vice captain, since she was the one that did more research on the pirate crews on East Blue and useful information for their journey in general. The Buggy Pirates. And she readily answered. They are one of the most feared pirates of East Blue, but are also the less infamous of the three. The crew's whole bounty is basically their captain's bounty, they really are not that much. She explained with a shrug. Clearly the supposedly infamous crew wasn't worth much in her eyes. Ah, I heard about that guy before. Always thought that if he simply painted his hair and changed his clothes, he could pass as a normal clown and never be seen again by the Marines. Guess he just likes the pirate life. Zoro added with a sarcastic smile. Think we would be lucky enough to grab some gold from their boat? She asked, turning to Luffy and Sabrine that momentarily looked impressed at her. What? They asked, raising an eyebrow. Shishishi, nothing. I am just glad to see you adapted to pirate life. Luffy clarified by putting his hands behind and giving Zoro a big smile. It's good to see you don't do things for half. However, Buggy is known for his greed, so I doubt he would let anything of value unprotected. Sabrine said, impressing the swordswoman with her knowledge about those pirates. She truly was the brain of the crew. Let me see if I find something. Luffy spoke and turned into a lightning bolt that went into the ship. Does he do that a lot? Before Zoro had finished her question, the captain was already back, surprising her. Sometimes. Sabrine said, amused by the swordswoman's reaction. You were right, Sabri, there was nothing of value there. Luffy said, getting to Sabrine's side, looking a little disappointed. It was her time to pat him on the head, even if she had to get on the top of her feet. Seeing how lively the town is, I don't think we will have a hard time finding him and his treasure either way. Zoro pointed out, making them realize how weirdly silent the town was. Not a noise of people, not even animals could be heard from it. It's unusual for a pirate to take a whole island as their territory, especially in the East Blue, but not impossible. Either way, it won't be for long, right, Captain? Hearing the blondie's question, an expression of anticipation formed on Luffy's face. Zoro also showed a similar expression. After all, it would be great to fight after days of nothing happening. And to have our first confrontation to be against Shank's old crewmate. Shishishi, this will be fun. Luffy declared as he started to go down the street, being followed by his two crewmates. A few moments back, when Luffy used his powers to make them arrive at the island faster, it made the sound of thunder, as well as a big light that made it even more believable that it was actual thunder, scaring those that heard it. Especially because nothing pointed out to a storm. On the rooftop of one of the houses in the town in front of the main plaza, there were two women hiding behind a chimney. The thunder? But I am sure the weather is stable and it won't rain anytime soon. A red-haired woman thought to herself as she put her left arm up, feeling the wind and making sure there was no actual risk of rain. She used as clothing a jean shorts that went until her knees, a white shirt with some few blue stripes on it, and brown boots. Her hair had a short cut, making her brown eyes stand out even more. If someone looked deep enough into her eyes, they would see not the look of a normal young woman, but of someone that fought and survived countless hardships. However, that still had a sense of despair encrusted on her. But besides that, what called people's attention wasn't her surreal beauty, but her mechanical and rustic right arm that was paradoxically an impressive and amateurish work. And she also carried on her back an axe that would probably be a little bigger than half of her size. Nami, what was that? Didn't you say today would be sunny all day? At the red-haired side came the question from another woman. This one also had a short cut to her hair that was of purple color. She only had dark pants, a white shirt and simple dark boots. In her hand she carried an empty bag, and in her waist was a pistol and a knife. She made her question and looked at her partner with her blue eyes, waiting for an answer. I don't know. There is literally no sign that it will rain. And the weather isn't favorable for thunder to happen, so I have no idea what is going on. The thought of what her partner said for a few moments, then she remembered an old rumor she heard once and tensed. Hey Nami. She called, poking her partner. What? Seeing the purple-haired expression, Nami didn't have the best expectations of what she would say. I don't know if it's true, but I heard a rumor, and as much as I don't believe it. Say it once, Karina. Nami interrupted her partner, trying to make her go straight to her point. Karina rolled her eyes before saying. You are too impatient, you know. In response, the red-haired looked at her with annoyed eyes. Okay. It's just that some people say Buggy ate one of those devil fruits. So, you think this was something he made happen? Karina explained, then gulped. As much as she didn't want to believe in this possibility, after all she didn't even believe in those said devil fruits. But as a professional thief she had to consider all the factors that could affect them. Nami's eyes went wide and she even paled a little. A pirate that could control thunder. Even if it sounded stupid and out of possibility for her, it would explain the weird and random thunder that just happened. And she also heard some rumors about Buggy having a devil fruit, but never paid attention to them. We shouldn't believe in those stories to scare children, you know. In the end that was the red-haired answer. Karina sighed, she understood Nami's point and agreed with her, however they had to reconsider their plans. You still want to try to steal them now? Karina asked her partner with a raised eyebrow. Nami bit her lower lip and thought. She didn't believe in tales to scare children that devil fruits were, at least for her, but she had to admit something weird happened, and Karina bringing up those rumors about Buggy made her unsure. Maybe we should go hide for some time and observe the pirates to see if something changes. Both felt this was the best route they could take for now, they even felt a little stupid for being scared of stories for children, but felt this was the safest approach. Also, even if their fears proved to be pointless, it was not a bad thing to take more time to consider their plan and learn about Buggy's crew to make their assault easier. Ironically however, their targets, the ones that supposedly could have powers only made up to scare children, were even more scared than the said children. In a large plaza with one big tent in the middle, some tables and chairs, there were a bunch of men that looked like they just ended their circus presentation. Was that? The question came from a man behind his chair. He had a slim build and blue messed up hair. His face was covered in makeup, with crossbones going down his face forming an X, as well as 2 blue lines near both of his eyes. He also made use of red ticks. His clothing was composed of green pants, white and red shirt with a fabric so dark green around it, and a red cape on his back. He also had a pirate hand with his Jolly Roger on it, but at the moment it was on the floor at his side. That scared man was one of the most feared pirates of the East Blue, Captain Buggy. It might start raining soon, Captain, we should probably raise our tents. Those words came from a tall and slim man that had the left half of his face covered by his dark green hair, with the other half having shaved strips with light green. He wore a large blue and white checkered scarf covering part of his face, a sleeveless brown coat that went until his knees. His pants were wide and large, held up by a light blue sash, and on his feet he used white shoes. The man however wasn't standing normally, he was sitting on a motorcycle, moving back and forth on it. He made his observation while looking at the sky, thinking it was a little weird that the day looked so sunny, but he only assumed the weather would change soon and didn't put much thought into it. Calm down, Richie, it's just a little rain that is coming. Next to the captain and to the man on the motorcycle was a third man, one that had white hair, as well as white fur, covering the area of his dot. He used blue pants with a black sash and white shoes that resembled animal fur. He was speaking with a lion that cowardly tried to hide his face with his paws, trembling because of the thunder. Everyone else looked at the scene with a drop of sweat running through their foreheads. Moji, Kabaji. Buggy called, and respectively the one near the lion and the one in the motorcycle went near the captain, who got his hat back on his head and sat on his chair again. Say it, Captain. What are your orders? Moji and Kabaji said, only waiting for Buggy to pass his orders. The rain will probably start soon, so I want you two to take some men and look in town for food, drinks and money. And after you come back it's party time for us. Buggy finished saying, raising from his chair and punching up with his fists, his men also doing the same and screaming, excited with the promised party. Let this be with us, Captain. They both said at the same time and moved to follow their orders. Moji went to his Lionel Richie, getting up on him and making him move as Kabaji had already gone out with some underlings after him. I still can't believe you know an emperor. And right, the one that rivals Dracula Mihik. As they went down the empty streets of what they discovered to be a town by the name of Orange's Town, Zoro spoke some of her thoughts to Luffy and Sabrine. Shishishi, it's a nice coincidence, no. We both need to take them down eventually either way. Luffy said smiling, casually talking about taking down an emperor and his rival. We could even say it was destiny. Sabrine said half joking and half serious. Zoro had to contemplate for some seconds, maybe it was truly destiny. As far as she knows, Morgan could have killed her and at the state she was in, not even herself believed she would have been able to fight back. After all, how could she when she had no swords or was tied? Not only they saved her life, Luffy was someone with a dream as big as hers and even indirectly related to her own goal. Maybe meeting them truly was destiny. She only knew that she had no regrets and that found certain comfort in this newly formed crew. Can you feel someone, Luffy? Sabrine asked, looking up to see her boyfriend's face. She was holding his left hand since Zoro was walking on his right side. They raised an eyebrow hearing that question, but waited a little to question. Some few people, Buggy's crew I guess. Though there are some far from others, maybe they are people from this town. From the swordswoman's perspective, her captain's words as he looked around in the street seemed like he was just mumbling or coming with something up. If it wasn't for the confidence he spoke with she would assume he was inventing that spot. How do you know this? Zoro assumed it had something to do with his powers, she only had no idea of what. You know, is that thing of electricity that's in through people's bodies. I get that. What? Luffy's explanation made Zoro more confused than actually helped in anything. Ahahahaha. Seeing Luffy's attempts and Zoro's reaction, Sabrine had to laugh before giving a proper explanation. It's actually pretty simple, Zoro. Our nerve system runs through electricity. Luffy can feel that electricity and sense where other people are. They went from confused to surprised, with widened eyes and an open mouth, an expression she was getting used to for the last few days. "You're broken," was the only thing she could say after that. "Shishishi, I heard that a lot." Luffy didn't even try to hide the pride in his voice as he said that. Zoro rolled her eyes but laughed at his attitude, and so did Sabrine. They went down even more on the streets, with Luffy being able to tell where people they didn't need to worry about being found easily. The silence of the streets however soon came to an end since, in the distance, they could hear loud noises of pirates screaming with each other and breaking into houses. The three looked into each other's eyes and silently decided on not interfering. They would only move on to find Buggy for their own interests, both on his treasure and to meet red-haired Shank's old crewmate. At the same time, Nami and Karina settled down in a house in front of a still well-maintained store. They also heard the pirates' commotion and took a glance at it through a window, though they couldn't see much from where they were. They sure like to make a mess. How long have they been settled in this town? And only now they are ransacking it. Buggy's management must suck. They commented sarcastically. She had her back to the walls and was with a glass of wine in her right hand, wine that obviously wasn't originally hers. Not that she minded acting like the pirates. DSC, of course they are too dumb. They work for a goddamn clown. They are just a bunch of Finishing her rant, the red-haired also took a drink of the wine, trying to ease her frustrations and annoyance. "It's hard to take you seriously when you are basically making almost the same as them," Karina said, playing with a glass of wine on her hands. She knew about Nami's rage and had ideas for the reason for it, but personally, she didn't see much of a difference between themselves and those pirates. "Shut up. That's not the same, and you know it. We are just taking some wine. Those mothers are invading houses and taking what could be someone's whole income. They destroy innocent lives without blinking. I am not like this." She looked at Karina with a fierce glaze, challenging her to say otherwise. The younger thief only sighed and didn't reply, knowing discussing this further would have no results. Especially now they were still in the middle of their work. Either way, now they have less people on the plaza, so is our best chance too. Before Nami could finish, there was a loud noise of glass, stone and wooden breaking, followed by muffled screams. Alarmed, the two went to the window and got the full view of what was happening. In front of the house they were in, the store was broken into, the remains of its showcase now on the floor, as well as other things they couldn't identify now. There were some underlings around the store, some of them were holding down an old man, but most of them were only watching. They were all around the store, and in the middle it was a man sitting on a lion, said lion being the one responsible for the destruction. At the side of the lion, a small and injured dog lay on the floor. Nami and Karina could hear his desperate barks in an attempt to stop the lion, even if it was more than clear that it was impossible for him. "These don't forgive not even animals and old people," Nami said with gritted teeth. It only took Karina a glance at her to know what she was thinking. "Nami, wait. Do you really want to warn them of our presence to save a dog and an old guy you don't know?" They asked seriously, looking at Nami and holding her mechanical arm. It was rough to hold and cold. She never learned how Nami lost her arm, though she had her ideas, and she generally wouldn't bother when the red-haired decide to trash some pirates around, but now. "This was the first time we put ourselves into the risk of going against one of the major crews of this blue. Do you really want to take this risk?" She saw as Nami gritted her teeth and looked once more through the window. Karina knew that look. "Sorry," she said that, lightly pushing Karina's arm, grabbing her axe and getting down the stairs of the house. And the purplinette's reaction was just a tired sigh. "Nami." Loading her pistol, she complained as she went after her partner. "Stop." The old man on the ground, being holded by other pirates, screamed. Even if he knew it was mostly in vain, he tried to appeal to those pirates. He had curling gray hair, distinctly bunched atop his head and down both sides of his neck. He wore a simple yellow shirt with thin brown lines, a dark short and sandals. His glasses were now on the floor beside him, with a crack on the right lens. He had small injuries covering his body, but the man himself didn't seem to mind them. Hey, you can't complain. My Richie here only wanted a meal, why get so worked up because of such a small matter?" Loji said with an expression of scorn and a despicable smile. The dog near them, who was still barking, had tears in his eyes as everything he worked so hard to protect was now gone in the blink of an eye. He wondered if his owner would be disappointed. After all, he was trusted to take care of the store, but he couldn't do it. As the lion devoured what was once the food the little dog tried so hard to protect, two things happened at the same time. Nami opened the door of the house she was in, already bringing her axe down, making a big and deep cut on the back of one pirate. Karina, behind her, aimed and shot, getting a second pirate on the shoulder. Besides the two of them, Luffy, Sabrine and Zoro also appeared at the beginning of that street, seeing that whole scene playing out. "What do you want to do, Lou?" Sabrine asked Luffy, and Zoro also looked at him, waiting for the captain's order. It wasn't hard for them to understand what was going on. A bunch of people with similar clothing and makeup attacking a place was probably a scene that happened all over the town right now. It only happened that this one had people on it. Though, the two girls didn't seem to be from there. "I don't really feel like ignoring something happening in front of me." It was everything he said to them. Sabrine and Zoro nodded and took a step ahead. "Let it with us then," the blondie said, pushing the steel pipe from her back, walking to the battle. Zoro watched her with interest. Since she met Luffy and Sabrine, she'd been wondering about the strength of the vice captain. She only had a feeling that Sabrine wasn't any weaker than her, and it was finally time to know. And the Buggy's pirates had no time to react, suddenly being attacked by two different sides. Some drops of blood splashed on Nami's mechanical arm, shirt and face. The agonized scream of the pirate only motivated her, and followed by her attack she kicked his back, throwing him to one of his crewmates next to him. Followed by the gunshot, they were even more lost. The one that Nami sent her first victim to instinctively got his crewmate as if he was hugging him. When he put his hands on the injured one's back, he only felt the blood dripping and a deep cut that went until the bones. He felt a deep sense of fear and a chill pass through his whole body. The next thing he saw was an axe going down his face. The sound of the skull breaking, the blood dripping from it, or the rest of pieces of the brain that fell on the floor once the pirate fell, none of that seemed to bother Nami. Though her trembling leg and slightly more pale face might say otherwise. Karina seemed to care even less as she fastly shot any pirate she could. There weren't many of them, a little more than 10, and they were falling fast. Zoro and Sabrine wouldn't take their time, and nothing either. With Wado Ichimonji between her teeth and her non-named swords in her hands, the wasted no moves to bring Buggy's underlings down. One swing of her sword and she made a cut into the neck of one pirate, making a gush of blood spill from there. They were disoriented and confused. For the four women they looked like simple sheeps waiting to be slaughtered. And Sabrine wasted even less time with the fight. Taking full advantage of the fact that both the lion and the man on top of him were completely stunned by the weird development things took, she went straight to attack them. Firmly holding her steel pipe, she brought it down on Richie's front right knee. The piece of metal connected to the knee made it bend like it was just a thin piece of wood. Moji felt the balance of the lion destabilizing and heard a cry of pain coming from Richie. Even so, he could do nothing with Sabrine's second attack was aimed to his head. Buggy's right-hand man went flying into a wall, the impact pinning his body into it as he coughed blood because of the injuries that he got just from that. At this point all the other pirates were already either dead or injured enough to die soon. "Are you okay, uncle?" Luffy asked, helping the old man to get up and giving him his glasses. Who are you?" In complete shock because of the scenes he just witnessed, that was the only thing he could ask. "Are you a bounty hunter?" It wasn't only the old man that had questions. Nami and Karina approached Luffy and Zoro, with the red-haired asking, looking at them. She had the impression that the green-haired reminded her of someone, though she couldn't spot who. "No, Monkey D. Luffy, the future pirate king," he said with no hesitation and showed them a big smile. While the old man got even more dumbfounded, Nami frowned and raised her axe, pointing it to Luffy. Zoro also frowned a little and was about to take a move when Luffy held her on the shoulder. "So you are a pirate?" she affirmed with clear rage and a rooted hate in her voice. While Luffy still didn't seem to react, Zoro was clearly not pleased with the red-haired attitude. And saw with how much ease trashed those pirates, so she was not willing to let her partner enrage these people. "Nami, these people helped us, so you don't need to act like that," Karina said, putting on a weak smile and holding on to her friend's shoulder. "And if you didn't notice, I am pretty sure that's Rorano Azora, so I wouldn't try to piss her off if I was you." The axe user's eyes went wide and she took one more look at Zoro, wondering if she really was the famous pirate huntress. Since Karina was more knowledgeable on these regards, she would trust her judgment. "Okay," she simply said, putting her axe back on her back. Seeing that she gave up for now, Zoro also put her swords on their scabbards and took a glance at Sabrine. The blondie, using one arm, was holding Richie like he was a little puppy. Zoro gulped at that. She wasn't exactly surprised, but to say it wasn't amazing to see her vice captain carrying a lion around like it was nothing would be a lie. Nami and Karina, however, were shocked. The red-haired even sweated a little, mentally thanking Karina for stopping her. "Shishishi, Sabri is amazing, isn't she?" Luffy couldn't hide his pride seeing their reactions, laughing seeing as Zoro slightly nodded her head. Now she was sure that she joined a couple of monsters. "You know, I don't feel like killing animals, so go sleep a little." After saying this she simply throws him in the ground, making a small crater, with the lion coughing some blood and going unconscious. He probably had some broken bones, but was not dead, and it was in a much better situation that most of the pirates were still alive, though not for long. After that she took a look at Moji, who was still struggling to get out of the wall, and then looked at Luffy, waiting to see his decision. She wouldn't need to, as Nami took her axe once again and throwed at the pirate, hitting it on his dot. The blade of the axe penetrated the flesh like it was butter. A large amount of blood went down his mouth as his eyes shined with despair. He briefly struggled more to get out of there, in vain, as a few seconds later, he was already done for. "Well, that solves that," Luffy remarked, not seeming to mind the white-haired man's death. The old man, however, turned his face around and started to throw up. The dark-haired looked at him with some sympathy and then looked at the injured dog on the floor. "Let's take care of him first," he said, obviously referring to the dog. Nami had no complaints about it, even if it came from a pirate. "Is there anyone else coming here, Luffy?" Sabrine asked when she got to his side. Karina and Nami looked at each other, not understanding the question. "I think all of those that are not on the plaza are coming here. You all made a bunch of noise after all." He said that with a calm expression and seemed to be looking at something beyond those houses. "How long till they get here?" Zoro asked with her hands already on the hilt of her swords. "Seconds, barely a minute, it's not a big town, and they were not far." The captain answered by stretching his arms, warming up. "Wait, what do you mean? Are you serious?" Not believing or understanding their conversation, Karina interrupted, doubting if they were actually serious. At her side Nami had a raised eyebrow, clearly thinking the same as her partner. Zoro looked at them with an understanding gaze, Sabrine had an expression of anticipation, and Luffy was laughing. Just as Luffy had said, in a few seconds they were surrounded by pirates, probably around 30 of them. While Sabrine and Zoro looked around with no interest, Nami and Karina tensed, the red-haired even cursed that she had thrown her axe. "Now it's with me." When they saw the bodies of their dead crewmates, the other pirates got enraged and moved to get their revenge. In one fast movement, Luffy created a ring of lightning with the tip of his index finger, and ignoring the widened and shocked expressions of Nami and Karina, and made a motion with his fingers. A ring of electricity grows, ignoring those around Luffy, but passing through each one of the raging pirates. Kabaji and some others had swords and guns on their hands, so when the energy passed through their bodies and went in contact with the metallic objects on them, amplifying the energy. What was only enough to bring them down, because of the amplification, would be able to kill. In a domino effect, some of them started to fall, with the ones behind her at the front also being affected. Some others had their bodies paralyzed because of the amplified electricity and had their muscles spasming, nerve system and internal organs being damaged. In seconds, and barely doing anything, the majority of Buggy's crew was on the floor, some simply unconscious, others dead with muscles still suffering from spasms. Looking around with a neutral face, Luffy suddenly heard a muffled noise and looked behind to see Nami and Karina looking at him with nothing but shock. "WW, what are you?" was all Nami could ask in her state. "Shishishi, I already said it, the future pirate king." After calming down they helped the old man, Boodle as they soon discovered, and also learned that he was the mayor. And Sabrine also did the best that she could to treat the little dog. Boodle told them what happened, the story of Chaochu, that because of a promise with his already long dead owner, tried his best to protect the store. However, they all already knew how this ended. While Nami said nothing, after all she was still shocked by Luffy's demonstration. When she heard that story her gaze told everything needed. Karina could only bitterly smile at the trio, thanking them that they didn't seem to care about the red-haired reaction. "So devil fruits are true. I feel kinda dumb that I thought it was Buggy's power now." Trying to ease the tension, Karina joked after hearing Luffy's explanation of his powers and where they came from. Nami said nothing about it, though she now understood why it didn't feel like it was going to rain, because it really wasn't. At the moment she was in the corner of the store cleaning the bits of blood from her mechanical arm. "I must have scared everyone. Back in Fuchsia they used to tell me I used to scare everyone with my powers, but I never paid much attention to it." Sitting on a chair in front of Karina, Luffy answered as he finished eating a plate made by Boodle. However, even if he had finally satisfied his hunger, he only carried a serious look. In the middle of the store was Sabrine and Boodle, taking care of Chaochu. The small dog was covered in fabrics, they used everything they could from the store to help him. "That's everything that I can do for him. Sorry, I am no veterinarian or doctor, so I couldn't be of much help." Finally finishing the treatment on the poor dog, Sabrine apologized, believing she was not of much help. "Don't say that. I don't even know how to thank you for your help." The mayor, however, thought the complete opposite of her and had tears in his eyes. They lost a lot, but at least Chaochu would be okay. Nami was completely divided with that. At first when she heard Luffy's declaration she just assumed they were lowly pirates trying to take advantage of the situation. However, now they not only helped the mayor, but one of her hated pirates treated the injured dog. Or are they really the same type of people as Buggy or Arlong? If not, then why do they even call themselves pirates? As her mind was in complete confusion, Karina only sighed, knowing exactly what was passing through Nami's mind. Maybe now she will see that now we are not so far from them. The thought to herself. Sabrine got to the captain's side and looked at him waiting for his next decision. Zoro at his side did the same, and even Karina and Nami did so. The two never forgot their goal here, and if they could use the help with such a monstrous power, they had no reason to not to. Maybe they were even considering something a little further than their current situation. After a few moments of silence, Luffy made his decision. I wanted to take a look at Shank's old crewmate either way. And if he is making that much of a mess, he looked at the injured and unconscious dog and at the crying mare. The old man reminded him of the old wood slap, and that's all he needed to sympathize with him. Maybe I should do a favor for Shanks and clean it. Let's go. With all surviving pirates knocked out and tied up, Luffy, Sabrine, Zoro, Karina and Nami left Boodle and Chow Chow at the broken old store and went down the street, aiming for the plaza where Buggy was. The group of pirates and thieves walked with neutral faces. They didn't seem particularly mad, but somehow this made their presence even more threatening. So what's the plan? Karina asked, trying to make the environment less stiff and also to understand how they should move when facing the infamous pirate. Sabrine and Zoro looked at Luffy, Nami and Karina also did the same and waited as the captain seemed to consider a few things. We should take him down and give him and his crew to the old man. They will make good use of his reward. Nami stopped right on her tracks hearing that. She thought about what he said again and again, trying to make sure she didn't hear it wrong. She had to have heard it wrong, it just didn't make much sense for a pirate to go to such lengths to help people he never met. Wait, what did you just say? The red-haired asked Luffy, and as he turned his face to look at her their eyes met. While Luffy saw eyes filled with doubt, distrust, but also a deep fear and even some despair. Maybe it was just instinct, but Luffy knew he had an amazing instinct, and he was always good at judging and sensing what people felt. And as for Nami, when she looked at his eyes she saw nothing of what she expected. She had dealt with a lot of pirates and killed a good amount of them. Most of which had their eyes tainted with their own desires, they looked less human and more like animals that only gave voice to their wishes and instincts, never bothering about the consequences for others. She didn't suffer most in the hands, the worst thing that happened to her all these years was almost getting shot after being stabbed, but she saw clearly what they did with others. That was the whole reason she took an axe after all, it felt like a weapon that was brutal enough to deal with scum like that. Even if she hated admitting it, she started to understand why her boss despised humans. However, she saw nothing of that on Luffy. His eyes looked almost clear, maybe not exactly as innocent as those of a child, but there was a sense of honesty there, like he didn't lie. His eyes didn't look tainted, like the said pirate she saw before. At the same time she clearly had a deep self-confidence, she knew those eyes. The eyes of someone that would never bend their will, of someone with a strong and burning desire. I mean, Buggy's head values a lot, right? Luffy's question was genuine, and Nami could see that because he looked at Sabrine for confirmation. The blondie nodded with her head, and Luffy continued. I am sure it will be enough money for them to pay for what they lost. The explanation couldn't be simpler, but for Nami it almost sounded like the most absurd thing she ever heard in years. Karina looked at all that with great interest, innumerable things seemed to be passing through her mind. Sabrine had a small smile of pride because of Luffy's word, and Zoro had an expression of content, both because of her captain and because of Nami's reaction to it. But, why? Luffy looked at her in doubt for some moments before answering. Because I feel like it. He answered shrugging and went on to soon get to the plaza. Sabrine got to his right side, hugging his arm, and Zoro took a look at Nami before accompanying Luffy on his left. Ha 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 ha. The red-haired looked at the side to see her partner laughing. You know your face is priceless right now. Shut up. Nami answered, having to get satisfied with not giving much attention to Karina. They laughed some more and rushed to Nami's side. I get you though. Your world vision just broke, I can't blame you for this, partner. But, those three are nice, aren't they? Just by her tone Nami already knew Karina had second, or even third, intentions. The red-haired looked at her partner, trying to predict what she was thinking. What are you planning? Karina gave her a sly smile before explaining. I have a strong feeling that we could ally with them. Just think about it, they are talking about taking Buggy down, one of the worst three pirates of this blue. And they probably can do it, Luffy can control lightning for God's sake. Imagine how easier things will be for us if we get on their side. The red-haired had no choice but to think about it a little, and indeed, Karina was right. Years of accumulated hatred for pirates wouldn't disappear obviously, but for now she could go with the flow and maybe follow her partner's plan. If those three turned out to indeed not be as the scum she is used to, so Karina was probably right as much as Nami didn't like to admit it out loud. Fufu, what are they planning? Sabrine whispered in her boyfriend's ears as she watched the duo of thieves with the corner of her eyes. The two had no idea the couple was aware of their small exchange. Luffy smiled at her, Zoro was at their side, also paying attention since she still had her guard up around the two thieves. Nothing much, they will want to stick with us after this. Hearing that, Zoro raised an eyebrow. She didn't have much problem with the purple-haired thief, but the other one annoyed her a little, especially with how she obviously viewed them or treated Luffy. Are you okay with this? She asked after she would still hear the captain's decision in the end. I don't see why not, they might even help us. And if they are as good thieves as they seem to be, they might even give us some more berries. Luffy said, making Sabrine satisfied with his reasoning, and Zoro only shrugged. It's not like the two could harm them in any way. Wait. Suddenly Nami's voice got to the ears, she had a demanding tone. Since you are helping us, you three can get some part of their treasure, but there is one thing that I can't give you. Some of their treasure. But we are doing most of the work, Zoro thought to herself, but didn't say it out loud. Buying a fight with the red-haired would just be a waste of her time, and she knew it. And since the woman was only asking for one specific thing, she didn't really care. And what would it be? Sabrine asked with a friendly expression, subconsciously letting Nami a little more relaxed. A map to the entry of the Grand Line, that's what I want. She wasn't sure what would be their reaction, since they were pirates, and Luffy declared that he wants to be the king of the pirates. It was obvious they would have to go to the Grand Line, sooner or later. So, she was betting her luck a little, because that map was worth a lot, there was no way she was going to let this chance slip like this. Zoro was a little surprised, Sabrine's mouth opened a little, and Luffy's eyes seemed to turn into stars. Do you know how to read maps? Luffy suddenly appears holding Nami's shoulders, his eyes shining and his smile full of amazement. Got by surprise, Nami almost reacted getting to her axe, but stopped herself when noticed the genuine excitement in Luffy's voice. Curious, she didn't grab her weapon, but pushed his hands from her shoulder. Of course I do, I am the best navigator on this whole blue. She said, not being able to hide the pride in her skills. The fact that Luffy seemed even more impressed, excited almost in a childish way, not only helped with her ego, but made Luffy look a little better in her opinion. Seriously? Do you want to join my crew? With the exception of Sabrine, his question got everyone by surprise. Zora's eyes went wide with how direct and blunt Luffy was, though she should already have expected that from him. Karina had a similar reaction, but firstly a cheeky smile formed in her mouth, while she thought to herself how it was nice that she barely had to do any work. And Nami had to question if that straw hat-wearing pirate had any common sense or sanity in his mind. And Sabrine only gave a small laugh that was completely inside expectations for her. Of course not. Maybe you are a little off the curve, but I think I was pretty clear with a bit of not liking pirates. She said, taking some steps back from Luffy and waving her arms from one side to the other in a denying move. This of course didn't make Luffy any less hopeful. Wait, let's not make any harsh decisions, Nami. Not wanting to let this opportunity slip between her fingers, Karina gets in front of Nami, making a signal for both her partner and to not take things too fast. Karina. Before the Redeed could complain, she put her hand in front of her face, asking to let herself speak for now. What she is trying to say is that, maybe instead of joining your crew right ahead, we could form an alliance first. And later we could decide on joining or not. What do you think of Luffy-san? She really didn't want to let this chance pass. With someone like Luffy, they could probably make stacks and stacks of money, and this to put lightly. She just didn't agree on completely joining the crew because of Nami's reaction. Who said we want you? Luffy, are you sure about inviting these two? Zoro had her arms crossed as she voiced her complaints. Even if they needed a navigator, she wasn't much with her captain's choice for it. Don't worry about it, Zoro, we can trust Luffy calls in this regard. Sabrine on the other hand was much calmer as she put her right hand on the swordswoman's shoulder. She knew and was with Luffy for much longer and trusted him completely, so of course she would also trust him even when he does abrupt calls like that. Zoro scratched her head and sighed. The blondie was right, maybe she only knew them for a few days, but it was clear to her how Luffy acted and the type of person he was. She wouldn't trust the two thieves for now, but she would respect the captain's decision. It was what she could do for someone that already showed much more trust and respect for her than most people did before. So, what do you call Luffy-san? Karina asked with her hopes high. If they actually partnered up, the two might get even more treasures from Buggy than if they did not. After all, that trio decided they didn't want to share. What would the two do? Not that they looked like the type to do it, even so, Karina to be one step ahead. Sure, that's nice for me. The captain said, putting his hands behind his head with a light laugh. He seemed to be in much higher spirits now that got two new potential crewmates. A small vein popped on Nami's head, more because of Karina than the pirates, or Luffy. She understood her partner's reasoning, and it indeed gave them benefits. That was not the part that annoyed her, the part that slightly annoyed her was Karina's cheeky expression as she looked at her. "Wanna say something, Nami?" She knew that face, that was Karina always acted whenever things went her way. "No, it works for me as well." The navigator contented herself with that answer. She could get some small revenge later either way. "Nice, we have a strong navigator and a cool thief. Today is going great." Neither of the thieves could fight against the subtle blush Luffy's sudden words gave them. "Is this a pirate?" Nami could only ask herself as they finally went to deal with Buggy. Buggy was simply bored the hell out of his mind. He lazily laid on his cheap knockoff of a royal throne, wondering why his crew was taking so damn long. He was already getting tired of that island, and the more they stayed, the more the risk of Marines showing up was real. "Are they lost or something?" he said, as he better positioned himself on the throne. He looked around and pointed to an underling that was near him. "Hey, you. Go there and find out what those people are doing. Tell them to come back soon, because I plan to end this trip with a bang." The blue-haired pirate said with a grin, getting up on his throne with his fists tightly closed. His grin was wild and mad, but it was more due to him than the wish of destruction. In front of him there was his biggest creation, and the one he was the most proud of. His own personal cannon wasn't just a big version of the normal weapon. The potent destructive power and even the reach of it far surpassed a simple, bigger cannon. It was at least 15 times more powerful than a normal one, and it was barely 3 times bigger than the usual. Sure, Buggy had to spend a little on it, but it was all worth it. He never had the muscles of the operation, so he had to put his money on something, and at least he had the brains to it. And he let a lot of brain to not waste money in vain. Every expense he had was for a purpose, and somehow served him. Of course, he only used money when he couldn't get what he wanted in other ways. His thoughts however were interrupted when the underling he sent to take a look at the town came back flying, hitting one of their tables and breaking it. Some blood dripped from the man's head, he was unconscious, but seemed alive. "What? Hey, young big red-nosed come here or I will punch you so hard your nose you get even bigger." A strong and rough voice resounded through the whole plaza, breaking the silence. The remaining Buggy Pirates tensed up and paled. With the corner of their eyes some of them paid attention to their captain's reaction. And Buggy was not taking it too well. With his face getting as red as his nose and several veins popping head, some even thought it would be a good idea to call the medic of the crew, since it seemed like the captain was about to have an attack. "Who is the mother that got tired of living?" Buggy screamed as he rushed to the entry of the plaza, on top of the stairs. He looked down, fastly finding the ones that dared to insult him. He saw 5 people, a 2 meters tall man and with an annoyingly similar straw hat in his head. On his right there was a blondie holding his arm and on her side a green-haired woman with swords. On his left there was a red-haired woman, this wasn't going to be a good day, with a mechanical arm and an axe. On her side there was a purple-haired girl, who looked at him as if he was a gigantic bank to steal from. He knew because he already had those same eyes. "The only one tired of living is you, Buggy. What Shanks would think if he knew that's what you've been up to, huh?" Luffy didn't need to use lightning to shock the clown pirate. That worked just fine. "They said you flashy bastard. The you mentioning that red-haired sucker for?" Well, both Nami and Karina put the fact that both of those two seemed to be connected by an emperor of all people in the back of their mind now. They enjoyed the blue-haired pirate, nightmare of the sea, seeming to have a rage attack. "I mean, since you are an old friend of his, I thought it would be cool to meet you. But now I am kinda pissed." Buggy however paid attention to nothing of what Luffy said. He seemed to be obsessive looking at Luffy's most prized possession on his head. He was gritting his teeth and his head was getting redder and redder. "Captain, I don't know what you did, but I think you are breaking him." Zoro was impressed with how little Luffy had to do and how furious Buggy was currently locked. To piss off one of the biggest pirates on the East Blue by just standing, it was almost an achievement of its own. They looked more bored than anything. The fact that Buggy was one of the 3 worst of the East Blue tells more about the sea than about him. "Wanna take them out or wait to see what they will do?" Sabrine shared the same feelings as Zoro. Since they already saw Buggy, they could end this soon. And Nami and Karina were watching mindfully, waiting for their opportunity to act. Watching this small exchange of theirs, Buggy felt like he lost years of his life just by rage. He had so many veins popping up on his forehead that doctors would be scared of his anatomy. Blow the Sirs to outer space. A scream to the top of his lungs, probably loud enough to be heard on the whole island. His underling, what he had left of them, fastly went to work under. "Shouldn't we start moving?" Karina asked, a little worried that the crew that went out of his circus could be planning on doing. "Nah, it's gonna be alright. Wanna see what they can do." But Luffy obviously gave no care. He gave them all the time in the world as he let his hand wander through Sabrine's hair, something the blondie clearly enjoyed. Zoro had her arms crossed, not moving, with half her attention on the couple and the other half on the clowns. I would like to be carefree like this. Nami, on the other hand, wasn't having as much of an easy time, holding her axe with some annoyment and gritting her teeth. Pay attention, you flashy-ers. After some quiet seconds, Buggy's voice reached their ears once again, making the trio lazily look up. Behold my masterpiece. He proudly declared, standing on what probably was the biggest cannon the five of them have ever seen, and that was pointed to them. Nami and Karina paled. They looked at each other rather than at the pirates. Their first reaction was to run, but when they took one step back they remembered what Luffy could do. Suddenly that big piece of metal that could shoot a sphere wasn't so scary anymore. What do you think? Luffy asked his girlfriend, to find her looking with shining eyes at the cannon. He grinned, already knowing how this would go. Buggy was screaming something about that being his strongest weapon, that even the Grand Line would fear, or something along those lines. No one was paying much attention to him. You guys should probably take some steps back. Luffy warned, then gave Sabrine a kiss on the cheek, making the others have slight blushes that were barely visible. You heard the captain. The blondie said happily, pulling Zoro. Her eyes were shining, and she had a hard time holding back her laughter. Something happened? The swordswoman asked, wondering what made her vice captain so happy. I am about to get a present. But Buggy laughing his lungs out of air, and Luffy simply standing in front of the cannon, while the other four were a few steps away. The shoot was finally taken. If metal could scream, it would probably sound like that. Nami and Karina hands went to block their ears. They could already feel the after effect of the shoot zoning on their minds. A strong blow of wind pushed through all of them, raising columns of dust. While Buggy expected a scenery of destruction and Zoro, Nami and Karina expected Luffy to use the magnetic aspects of his powers. They all got surprised. At the moment the shoot was taken, Luffy simply raised his hand. What they saw wasn't destruction or him using his powers. He simply holded that sphere of metal that could set a path of destruction on this island. If looked carefully they would notice small bolts of electricity around the sphere, but even so, Luffy had actually used his physical capabilities to hold that thing. Zoro gulped with wide eyes. She already knew Luffy was strong, but this was simply getting on another level. She looked at him with awe. If she had any shadow of doubt about following Luffy before, it was gone now. She knew that going along with him would make her stronger. If there was anyone for her to go along with, it had to be the future Pirate King. Karina's knees failed and she fell to the floor. Her body was trembling and her pupils couldn't get smaller. But slowly a smile started forming on her dot. I found the jackpot. He is simply amazing. If I stick with him I bet I will never have to worry too much about anything ever again. Her eyes had already turned into stars and a small saliva got out of the corner of her mouth. She was too distracted to notice Sabrine looking at her with the corner of her eyes, with a small smile on her dot. Nami let her axe fall to her feet as everything became silent. She was pale, cold sweat running through her body. She didn't want to think about it. She tried to block these thoughts, but it was harder and harder. He had electric power, he could hold a weapon of mass destruction with bare hands, and wasn't as bad of a pirate. After 8 years, when she was probably a few months or even weeks from completing her goal, she found this living monster in human form. Was this some joke? Fate decided to play with her to give some hope. Or it would be false hope. She didn't know, and she was a little too scared to know now. And Buggy was scared shitless. Most of his underlings screamed running that Luffy was a monster and that they would die. The captain however was stuck, not literally, but he was too astonished to move. His chin had fallen to the floor, not in a descriptional sense, but actually had fallen to the floor. Didn't surprise Luffy or Sabrine, since Shanks had told the dark-haired boy about his old friend's powers and the other three were still too busy trying to process what Luffy did to notice. Snot run down his nose, at least he didn't look pale, since he already used white makeup. Yashi. Let's Lee. See, Luffy casually commented, putting the iron ball on the ground and giving it a few taps, making sure it would stay still. And now. The bottom of his body turned into a bolt of lightning. To others' eyes Luffy moved so fast he seemed to teleport, suddenly showing up in front of Buggy, with currents of electricity around him. The dark-haired only gave the time to do one last comment. Huh. Who would have thought? He truly is a flashier. Was Biggy's last comment as his consciousness was cut out. After getting over their shock, the pair of thieves fastly moved to get all the valuables the Buggy Pirates had collected through their activities. Both Karina and Nami had shiny eyes seeing the total of 10 million berries in their hands. Boodle had arrived a few moments later after Buggy's defeat, not wasting a second to tie the blue-haired pirate's whole body. The mayor had been warned about Buggy's ability, so he wasn't willing to take chances. 15 million boys, I don't know how to thank you. With tears and gratitude, Boodle thanked him from the bottom of his heart, bowing to Luffy and the others. Shishishi, it was nothing. No need to think too much about it, old man. You should call the Marines soon. If word gets out that Buggy was captured, they will get here in the blink of an eye. Talking about them, we should get going, right Captain? Zoro said, getting closer to Luffy as he spoke with the mayor. Since she had a lot of experience as a bounty hunter, she had a good idea of how the Navy would act once they heard how one of their worst 3 got captured. Yeah, you are probably right. You two are coming with us, right? Karina was ready to put her hand up, showing every bit of disposition that she had to join them. The best part was that she didn't have to fake that at all. Yes. Surprisingly enough, however, Nami was the first one to answer. She had a serious face but looked nervous and confused. Karina looked at her with surprise. She didn't expect her partner to be so straightforward with this. To be honest, she was still expecting the red-haired to show some unwillingness to join her ally with them. Though, I can guess why she would change her mind. Zoro had a raised eyebrow. The change, though not abrupt, was curious, so she would attempt to keep an eye on the red-haired. Luffy only smiled. Getting a great thief and a navigator at once could only make him happy. A lightly pull on his shirt took him out of his thoughts and made him look down to meet Sabrine's of expectation. Blue, can we get it? Her eyes were shining as she pointed to the cannon of the old Buggy Pirates. The blondie looked at that weapon as it was a big gift she could barely wait to unwrap. Sure. And of course he wouldn't be able to say no to her pleading face. Hey old man, can we get a boat? It doesn't need to be too big, I think a fishing boat would be enough. Boodle adjusted his glasses and looked at the cannon Luffy was pointing to. He really wasn't planning on keeping it, and he doubted the Marines would ask about it. That's the minimum I can do for you. Just give me a second. The old man soon put himself to run to get the boat ready for them. He could explain the situation for the others later, he knew they wouldn't mind, and even if they complained, they saved their town, they could afford giving them a small boat. I think we should get the ammo for that too, before leaving. Karina suggested, trying to show her goodwill. Already working on that. They looked to the side to see Sabrine and Zoro coming over carrying packs of what she could only assume to be the ammo of the cannon. She also could only wonder how heavy they really were, since the two were caring for them like they weighed nothing. They will need a little bit of a redesign, but I think that after a few hours I would be able to make more, with some improvements even. We just need the resources. Sabrine commented happily. For her, Christmas had gotten away earlier. It would have been more perfect if they had their resources to do more of those ammos now, but it seemed like Buggy already spent all of those on the ones on their hands. Didn't know you were that much into weapons. Zoro knew that just having spent a few days with them there was no way she would know them completely, but seeing Sabrine that was usually so calm and contained acting so excited was a bit of a surprise for her. Not a big fan of cold weapons, but any type of fire gun I am more than happy to have. I like to use them, study, disassemble and reassemble. I can do a whole lot of things with it. She explained to Zoro that nodded while hearing. Though she didn't exactly share the enthusiasm for the same type of weapon, she did understand the feeling because of her swords. Next, Nami heard everything and was looking at her axe. Maybe she also understood them. And understanding and relating with pirates is still something new for her. Without even having to get on the plaza, Luffy used his electromagnetic powers to raise the cannon and carried it to the port. The Buggy Pirates ship was already a small point on the horizon. They were already fighting themselves to death to decide who would be the next captain, since all of their big names were taken out. Those would probably be the last days of the crew. And, after a few minutes, now with a second boat with the cannon tied to their main boat, the crew took sail. So, where do you know the captain? Karina asked with a smile from ear to ear. Becoming a pirate wasn't how she thought her day would originally go, but she was convinced this would turn out well. She would discover not too far in the future that she was right. Nami looked at him with curiosity, Zoro with a neutral but loyal expression, and Sabrine with a gentle smile that told him she was just waiting for his orders. Actually, there is an island that I asked to take a look at. He said, laughing with old memories, and even the blonde looked curious to what her boyfriend was talking about. One woman alone was standing on the beach, looking at the vast sea and the moving waves with her curious brown eyes. She was tall, though if she stood next to Luffy would still look smaller, had slightly tanned skin, probably due to standing under the sunlight for quite some time. She also had long and blonde hair that was slightly moving thanks to the wind. Her clothing was simple and looked handmade, mostly being made of raw leather and leaves, only working to cover her legs until the knees and her noticeability dot. Her eyes were filled with curiosity as she looked at the sea, seeming to be wondering about numerous things. Are the islands out there like this one? Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Bluewr for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.